Transferring wealth successfully starts with asking yourself questions that will give your family a better life now and for generations to come. In this podcast, financial professionals John and Michael from Copper Beech Financial Group guide you through eye-opening questions to help you discover the truth about your wealth. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to The Truth of Your Wealth with John and Michael Parise from Copper Beech Financial Group. Today is their inaugural podcast. This gives everyone in the audience an opportunity to learn more about their business and more about them personally. So I've got about 20 questions or so I'm going to ask, and these gentlemen are going to answer these truthfully, honestly, and with a little bit of fun, hopefully. And you're going to hear a lot about who they are and what they do and why they do it. So let's get started. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Doing good?
Absolutely.
All right. All right. So for your first question, we want to know a little bit about your history. So why did you decide to work in financial services?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. It goes back after I graduated college. My parents became very ill, and I had to be responsible going back and forth from where I worked to where they lived to try to take care of them and help raise my 12-year-old brother at that time. And through that process, my sister was involved as a co-executrix with the will that my mom had put together. And both of us were responsible to take care of the activities after the passing of both of them. It was very, very difficult. I lost both my parents within 8 months apart from each other of cancer. And as I just said, I had to continue to take care of a 12-year-old brother who was a terrific young kid. But as you can imagine, he lost both his parents, he lost his friends, he lost his school. He had to move in with me and my wife, which was about an hour and a half away from where my parents lived.
Wow.
Through that process, my sister, who is, as I said, a co-executrix, in her document, had a very deep conversation with my mom regarding what to do with the assets that they owned. And one of them was a piece of real estate that my mom believed was worth X dollars, and she made my sister promise not to sell that house for less than that. So I'll make a long story very short in that regard. After my parents passed away, we attempted to value all the assets in the estate, because as a fiduciary, as a trustee or someone who's managing estate affairs, it's your responsibility to pay the debts off and to implement the transition of the estate to the heirs. So we went to value the property, and sure enough, it was worth a lot less than my mother thought it was worth. And my sister at that time refused and did not allow me to sell that property. She hired an attorney, fought me in the estate plan, and make a long story short, again, 3 years later, we finally sold the property for the price that it was valued for, which was, again, that lesser number. And the attorneys walked over all the money, and we got zero. And I lost my sister for 27 years from that activity. So that drove me to believe there was a better way to help families resolve these estate issues and make sure there was clarity amongst the family members on the transition of one's estate and the parties that were going to be involved. So that motivated me to dive deep into the financial services industry. And I started back in early 1984 and began a financial planning type practice with a focus on advanced estate planning and making sure families did not make the error that my parents had made. It was a good lesson to be learned. It helped me with my passion in the business, and that's what drove it.
And John, how old were you at that time?
I was in my early 30s, I think 32. And my brother was 12 years old, I believe, at that time, going on 13. And it was interesting. My wife was pregnant with my son, Michael, at that time, and she became an instant teenage parent, which was very difficult for her as well. And she stepped up to the plate and took that responsibility. And it was very challenging for both of us to handle, but it all worked out. My younger brother graduated with his PhD from Rutgers and worked at MIT. Now he works at Juilliard. So it all worked very, very well for us.
Wow, that is amazing. I can't imagine the emotions involved and the stress involved with a married couple, pregnant wife, and taking on this another huge responsibility. I can see why you'd be very passionate about helping others not have to go through all of that, even though in the end you look back and say it was an amazing journey, but wow, that must have been tough.
Yeah. And again, it's helped it helps us develop these very focused strategies, especially with the second generation. We have a tendency to get very involved with the second generation and possibly third with families to make sure these errors don't occur.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you've kind of given us in a nutshell who you work with, but can you give us a dive down a little bit deeper? Who are you looking for to work with?
Yeah, along the way, as I ran my practice through the 80s into the 90s, my firm always worked with privately held business owners, particularly with kids in the business or family in the business. And it's a very complex environment. And we focus on that. And usually it's as I said, a privately held business, affluent, complex issues, a generational focus. They're worried about G3, Generation 3, their grandkids. I always talk to my clients, they love their grandkids more than they love their kids. So they have a deep focus on trying to take care of that third generation. So we focus on, again, that business owner with that goal of generational planning.
That's great. Yeah. You ask my wife, she loves the grandkids more than she loves me, more than she loves her kids, more than she loves the dogs, all of them. No, they come first for sure. All right. So how do you find these new clients? How do you acquire them?
Yeah, we always work with our clients' advisors. We act as a CFO to families. So we collaborate, and that's our key approach to working with these very complex families. We have to work as a team member, but we coordinate that team. Again, we act as that CFO. And so we get a lot of referrals from our clients themselves and their advisors who understand the skill sets that we have to help other families develop these planning processes.
Absolutely. That it sounds like it's a much, much needed practice in that realm. I can imagine most people have a CPA or an attorney that they work with, and nobody's on the same page. Nobody ever meets together. It sounds like you fill that role perfectly.
Yeah, we always use the word silos. A lot of the, and it's very normal. It's not that the clients are making a mistake, but the way the industry operates is the attorneys do X and the CPAs do Y, and their insurance agents do the other pieces, and their bankers do a piece, and other advisors. But very, very seldom we see them all work together as a part of the team. There's a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, which I preach a lot to my clients to read, because the philosophy is teams work 97% better as a team with answers and solutions than one particular person coming up with an idea. So that team building is what we focus on, and we very seldom find that in the families we work with. So we help build that. That's
great. You help build their team. So now my question to you is, who's on your team that helps you execute this?
I've got my son, Michael, who's my JD on staff. He's my sidekick. He works with my families, and he is my succession to the business, which was very important to me as I started Copper Beech. I also have a team of support folks here at the office that are extremely talented in very specific areas of my practice. So we have a team of 6, and it's a very, very focused approach to our families.
Great. And I know that it's amazing to have an office, and you have your son working alongside you, and he's actually beside you right now. And I know this is more kind of how you have the history of the business, and you created this, and you've created it also for the next generation. But I want to bring Michael into the conversation now. So Michael, what do you guys do in the community? What does Copper Beech do in the community as a whole, and also individually? Kind of tell us what you do to get in there.
Within the community, Copper Beech, we've been in Southern New Jersey, the Philadelphia area. I've been here my entire life. As my father said, he's moved down here probably right around when his parents passed away. Again, that was before I was born. But we've been down in the Southern New Jersey area for my entire life. And so we're very familiar with this area. My personal interests, apart from my work with Copper Beech, I have a wife and a young daughter who just turned 2. I have a dog as well. He's a Boston Terrier, wonderful little guy. And we like being outdoorsy. We like hiking. I play music as well. So we're pretty active within the Southern New Jersey community, Philadelphia area, in those activities.
Oh, yeah. The 2-year-old will keep you busy, man.
Yes, she does.
Great. Well, congratulations. That's great.
And she is my special number one.
Oh, yes, I bet.
As we said, grandchildren are the most important thing, right?
That's right. That's right. They're a lot more fun. You can hand them back. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's great. I like to make sure my 4-year-old grandson has a little bit of Mountain Dew in before he goes home, just to get my kids a little lesson in creative energy. Okay. What designations or advanced education do you guys have?
I have a BA degree in business administration, specializing, believe it or not, in hospital administration. I forego that to get into the financial services business, obviously, because of the story I just told.
And I'm a licensed attorney in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I did not decide to go into legal practice when my father was opening Copper Beech. I really was in law school very interested in the estate planning, the business succession planning, tax planning arenas. And I really, in talking with him in law school and hearing the stories and some of the work that he was doing with his clients, became really interested in that side of the business. And so I decided not to go into legal practice and stay on the financial services side, and really help families, as I like to say, prevent problems from occurring, as opposed to some attorneys, unfortunately, they have to work after the conflict has occurred and try to put the pieces together. I much prefer to be on the side of preventing problems from happening in the first place.
Yeah, that's the best side to be on.
Absolutely, yeah.
After hearing this story and after hearing kind of the history of what drove you to start this practice, I'm really interested in this next question. What is your financial philosophy?
Oh, there's many. One of the philosophy I have is it's not what you make, it's what you keep. Our strategy is always around making sure the assets you create, you maintain, whether it's a asset protection strategy, whether it's a tax strategy, or whether it's a state strategy. We want to make sure we keep as much financial assets in the family as possible, again, through the generations. We use a lot of very creative trust designs to accomplish that. We call them bloodline concepts, where, G1 creates the wealth and you could perpetuate it for many generations if you so choose. So our philosophy is really that type of focus. Is folks we work with work very, very, very hard creating wealth. They create a lot of stress in their lives, a lot of complexity. And we try to ease that with our processes. And the byproduct of, if they follow our direction, they typically preserve that wealth successfully without sharing it with parties that do not wish to share it with.
And to add on to that, again, we work primarily with family businesses and privately held companies. And one of the areas that we see weakness in that arena is the business owner is spending 70, 80, 90 hours a week, very active in their business, developing a lot of success, and they're a wonderful CEO of their business. But when it comes to being a CEO of their family, that's where we see some disconnect or some weakness. And that's where we like to come in and, again, be that CFO of the family side to make sure that all the hard work that the business owner has put in creating that wealth, that can be preserved, perpetuated for future generations, sometimes 3, 4, or even further, depending on the family's desire. But that's I would say, a big piece of our philosophy with what we do.
Yeah, I'll jump in one more piece to that. Is there's another saying that I often talk to my clients about: you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So we're educators and teachers of concepts and options. So Michael's point is well taken, that business owner spends all of his time pretty much running his company and working with his employees and forgets about the other piece, which is the more important piece, that if you don't do that correctly, all that success fails to that next step. So we teach clients different ideas and concepts to, again, preserve that wealth, transfer that wealth, control it, develop strategies with governance, and making sure their kids are educated on being responsible for the inheritance of that money, or all the other pieces that go along with that. So it's a very interesting, and we often joke with clients, we act as psychiatrists and psychologists most of the time. We're just not money guys. And they laugh about it because they agree, because counseling families and balancing all those issues are very, very complex, and the skill sets are required to do that are great.
Absolutely. And any business owner, successful business owner out there that's listening to this right now knows that if you can bring somebody in to do a job that you can't do, that's how a business runs, right? I mean, you need
Absolutely.
somebody to run the machinery. You need somebody that is a better baker than you, or whatever the cause is, or whatever the need is. You hire that person to do that because you have the specialty that you focus on, which is running the business. Bring somebody else in to do the rest because it's not worth killing yourself to do it.
Sure. And that collaboration I mentioned earlier in the podcast, think of it this way. Clients are stuck in the middle. That's another term I use, where they have all these very talented advisors working around them, but he doesn't have the skill set to understand their components. He doesn't have the knowledge as the attorney has on drafting documents, but yet he signs those documents and maybe not be the right document to sign, but he trusts his attorney. I'll be quite honest with you. I've been in this business 34 years. I haven't read a will once it's right. Not that the document's not correct. It hasn't been maximized through the process of planning. And that's just really the nature of the industry. But the clients are getting stuck in that middle, trying to figure that out themselves. And they have no time, temperament, or training to do that. So it's a tough challenge for them, which is why we think our model really works and rings bells to our current families, because we take care of those issues on their behalf.
Yeah, you're right. The attorney's not a CPA and the attorney's not a financial advisor. So they don't know all the ins and outs. So having that party that knows all those pieces and can put them all together, that's invaluable.
And working together, having a second set of eyes in that instance, legal estate documents, whatever the case may be, is really helpful. And the families we've seen very much enjoy being able to have a second set of eyes, just making sure that the documents meet their objectives based on the conversations that we've had with the family.
Great. All right, we have reached the halfway point in this podcast. Now we're going to be talking about or asking questions about you guys personally. You guys ready?
Uh-oh. Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right.
We'll see.
I like the answer of uh-oh. Okay, the first one is pretty easy. When you guys aren't working, what do you guys do for fun?
I play golf. I enjoy golf immensely.
Are you good?
I try to play golf. I don't do it very well, but we do that. We spend a lot of time with family. We live pretty close to each other, probably about 15 minutes. My parents and myself, actually, all of my immediate family lives pretty close. So we spend a lot of time together doing that. I spend free time, again, as I mentioned a little earlier. I try to be as outdoorsy as I can, hiking, fishing, things like that. As I said, with the 2-year-old, that's a little difficult to do sometimes, but we try. And I play music a good amount. I still play in a band from time to time.
Oh, nice.
And I've been in bands probably most of my adult life since I've been 18. So I do that when I can as well.
Right on. All right, guys, here's another question for you. Who would you say is your hero?
I say it's my mother, which is interesting because part of that story I told you earlier, my real dad died when I was 5, and my mother had 4 of us in 35 months.
Wow.
I have a identical twin brother, and my older brother's 10 months older, and my sister's 10 months younger, and it was not easy. That was back in the 60s, and she was a very, very bright woman. She was got a master's in nursing. She was very smart, but she had a challenge managing 4 children, and I'd vote her for president in a heartbeat if she was still here today.
Wow. Michael?
That's pretty tough to top. I wish I had a chance to meet her. Unfortunately, didn't. She passed away before I was born, but that's a pretty good one. I'll go back a little further. I think if I could aggregate and say a lot of people, I would say the founding fathers of the United States are pretty fascinating people when you look at what they had to deal with in terms of the risk of trying to build this country. I still sometimes will just think about that, and it kind of puts your life in perspective a lot of times with what we deal with today. But they're pretty heroic people, I think.
Yeah, we seem to have a little easier than they had it back then.
Yes,
just a little bit.
That's kind of an understatement in a good many ways.
All right, guys, if you had all the money you ever needed, what would you do?
I'd set up a foundation. Actually, we talk about it. We're doing one this year, actually, and I would create a foundation to support cancer research, support autism. I'm certified in special needs planning, so that's a very important part of our practice as well. But those are the things that I would do. I'd set up a foundation first and foremost.
Yeah, I would second that. I think philanthropic planning, which we do with our families and do ourselves, I think is probably the most rewarding thing that we do with families. So I would second that. I think you have to stay busy, right? If you had all the money in the world. So I think giving back to the community with a foundation or other charitable vehicle is pretty exciting to do if you had the opportunity.
Yeah, if you've been blessed with it, give it away. I mean, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. We concur.
Great. Now, Michael, you spoke a little bit about the founding fathers. Obviously, those are definitely figures in history, and maybe you have somebody else that you want to add to this list. But John, maybe this question's more for you. Who's your favorite person in history and why?
I say Ronald Reagan, and only because the skill set he had from a leadership position was enormous. He was a kind gentleman, had wisdom and vision far beyond most people that I read about. Mm-hmm. Instinctively, I would go to Ronald Reagan. And it has nothing to do with politics as much as it's to do with who he was as a person. We look at people. We don't really get concerned about what their beliefs are. When you're a solid human being, that's important to us. And he was one of those to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Not that I could think of. I think, I mean, I was still younger when Ronald Reagan was around, so I hear good things about him, but I don't know him firsthand or even when he was president.
I'm kind of surprised he didn't say his father. What do you think about that, Eric?
It depends on the day.
Yeah, in history, I don't know. You're still there. All right, so guys, what is your idea of success?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think maintaining a positive approach to everything that we do. There's so much negativity in our world around us. It's hard to fight through that. So that positive stance on all issues, whether it's family issues, whether it's community issues, is you got to always stay positive. That came to my head very quickly. I'm an extremely positive, hopeful person, mm-hmm. and that would be my belief.
Yeah, I think success is obviously different depending on the person you're talking to, but I think finding a passion and feeling fulfilled in life, whatever calling that may be, I think is probably the ultimate definition of success as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. What is one thing you guys recommend most to clients, family, or friends? And it could be anything.
Strong communication between family members and an honesty between them. We find that's a breakdown in a lot of families you work with. We try to make that change in family governance. Most people sometimes, if they have issues between each other, they don't talk a lot about it. They walk away from it or back away from it. We kind of hopefully bring them together. I think communication or enhanced communications, it would be my answer.
Yeah, I would second that. That's tough to beat. I think that's vital for every family to do. You have to be talking, especially in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm. It's all about communication, and I'm hoping you're ready because I'm going to ask you to communicate very clearly. This is my favorite question on the list. Name one thing that most people don't know about you.
I'm a chef. I like to cook. It's one of my hobbies. Some families or some people do know I cook, but most people do not. So I often say that if I wasn't in this business, I'd be a chef someplace. I enjoy cooking. I think it's an art form that is very, very fascinating. It's very, very comfortable for me. I don't mind being in the kitchen and helping feed my family. They always like my cooking, which is great. So it's a lot of fun. And my second thing, to get back to a question before, is I also like being down at the beach. I enjoy that silence down there and open a glass of wine and sit on the deck and watch the waves roll in. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, nice. Michael?
I would say I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy geek. So Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite books, probably the favorite book. So I really big into that kind of scene. I don't do the cosplay stuff and go to Comic-Cons and things like that. Although my wife talks about going from time to time. So I make sure that I have to put that on the list. But
one of these days.
I do love all things sci-fi.
Oh, right on. Well, one of these days, I'm sure you'll be there in full uniform, whatever that is.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. All right, guys. When we all face turbulence. We all face, situations in our lives that can kind of bog us down. And John, earlier you were talking about, you just want to be positive. You want people to be positive. It's definitely the way to have an outlook on life. When it's hard and when it gets difficult, what is your mantra, motto, or something you say to yourself to keep yourself focused and on track?
My family is very important to me, and I always try to keep them in my thoughts, no matter where I am. I contact my daughters. I have two daughters, along with my wonderful son, Michael, who I love dearly. Call them every day. I send them love notes every day. They're very important to me, and that keeps me. So my mantra is family and love. I think that's the key.
That's beautiful. Michael?
I would say, in addition to that, I think that's tough to beat here with some of these responses. I would say, in addition to all that, I would say stay focused. I think in today's day and age, it's very easy to be distracted by a lot of different things, whether that's technology or something else. So I think staying focused on again, getting back to the earlier point, what your passion is and what your definition of success is, I think is really important in today's day and age, is to stay focused and to sometimes slow down and to again to do that if that's your goal. I think that's really important in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm. All right, gentlemen, what is your proudest achievement?
Wow. Building out my vision of Copper Beech. I've been working on that for over 20 years, and creating through that vision and having the opportunity to bring my son into that equation, which was absolutely tremendous for me, because I think what we've created at Copper Beech is dynamic and wonderful. And people ask us all the time, how'd you come up with the name Copper Beech? Well, the Copper Beech tree is the tree that people use for the family tree. Mm. And basically it takes 150 years to grow the roots of that tree. So we relate that to the generations of our families. We often say we're the next generation advice to families. It's advice to the next generation, G2 or G3, mm-hmm. and the next generation advice, which is the higher level advice that's in the industry today. So that's pretty much, and we often mention to clients, it's not always about money. There's other things that are more important than money. It's those family values, the governance, the communication, the success of the family. And I think the Copper Beech story helps those families achieve that.
Yeah.
I think being a father is probably the biggest achievement I've had thus far, although I'm only 2 years into that.
Mm-hmm. He's doing a pretty good job.
Hopefully a lifelong process. That's a huge adjustment, as I'm sure any parent knows. So that's a big achievement, I would say. And then becoming an attorney was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do for 3.5 years. Mm. It took a lot of time, a lot of energy and sacrifice. So that's another huge achievement in my life.
Great. All right, guys, we're to our last question. This podcast is going to grow an audience. Hopefully it grows very quickly, because people need to hear this and hear what you're going to be saying. And to that point, what are people going to hear in these podcasts? What are you going to be sharing?
Mike, you want to take a shot at it, and I'll kind of add in?
We're going to be talking a lot about what we think are questions and topics that business owners, families necessarily aren't hearing, and we think it's important. So we're going to really focus on a lot of these topics that we think everybody should be considering, especially as it relates to their planning. As my father said, it's more than just money, and we think some of these topics that we're going to talk about, or all these topics that we're going to talk about, really fit that boat and are going to be really important for families to hear.
Yeah, a lot of those areas are going to be around asset protection strategies. A lot of the families we work with are on second and third marriages within the family. That's a challenge for most families to manage through financially. Estate planning techniques that minimize taxation, income tax planning techniques which minimize income tax strategies, working with your team of CPAs and tax attorneys, family governance strategies, how to conduct family meetings, how to develop communication skills, how to counsel your kids. We usually charge homework assignments to our families to work on. We'll be talking about investment techniques that yield a tax-free approach to their ultimate objective of earning income from those portfolios. So we have a lot of topics that we could talk about. There's probably 50 of them that we could focus on for a good 20 minutes on each one of them. So we're going to pick our favorite ones, hopefully, through these podcasts and deliver the message.
Fantastic. Hey, guys, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
No problem. And thank you all for listening to The Truth of Your Wealth with John and Michael Parise. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when John and Michael come out with new podcasts, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And those listening, you're going to want to share these because you know people that need to hear what they have to say. Thanks again for listening today. For everyone at Copper Beech Financial Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Truth About Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Copper Beech Financial Group. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities offered through American Portfolio Financial Services Incorporated, a member of FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory and financial planning services offered through American Portfolio Advisors Incorporated, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Copper Beech is an unaffiliated entity of APFS and APA. Any opinions expressed in this forum are not the opinion or view of American Portfolios Financial Services Incorporated, APFS, or American Portfolios Advisors Incorporated, APA, and have not been reviewed by the firm for completeness or accuracy. These opinions are subject to change at any time without notice. Any comments or postings are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or a recommendation to buy or sell securities or other financial instruments. Readers should conduct their own review and exercise judgment prior to investing. Investments are not guaranteed, involve risk, and may result in a loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Investments are not suitable for all types of investors.